All right, thanks for coming, everyone. So it's slightly different to the program. I'm a stand-in speaker as of the early hours of this morning, but it's quite an important topic to me, so I've offered to present it here. This is something that's often overlooked in our industry, and I felt it was a good one for a conversation starter. The reason for doing this talk for me actually came from a conversation I had with my sister, who works for Women's Aid, and it was about the topic of tech-enabled abuse, and I was surprised with how little I actually knew about it, which led to a lot of research, and the outcome is this talk, and hopefully a lot more knowledge for yourselves as well to take back into sort of your day-to-day. So every slide has to have one. So this is about me. So in my day-to-day, I work with projects in a business, primarily looking at risk analysis, recommending controls for applications and projects we have. I'm also a member of Forfox. I think what I do there could be summed up with sort of the mad science side of things, but primarily speaking, I'm really interested in secure software, mitigating risks with application design. And I've got a bit of background in operational fraud risk management. My Discord's there if you want to have a chat, or catch me afterwards if you do want to discuss anything. So because of the nature of the topic, and as you'll see, because of the statistics that are involved, someone in the audience may well have experienced some of the things I'm going to talk about today. So this is just a warning to state that this topic will include references to domestic violence, coercive control, manipulative behaviour. Please look after yourselves. If you need to step out, please do so. We've got friendly green shirt volunteers. I'm also happy to have a chat if you want to stop by afterwards and speak to me, or if you want to catch me later on as well. So what is tech-enabled abuse? Well, the term actually started to become popularised in August last year. So there was a report for MPs calling on the government to tackle tech-enabled abuse. This came from an inquiry that happened in May 2022, and it was by a group that was looking into Internet of Things devices, IoTs, and the dangers or opportunities for them, given that they were rapidly becoming a very, very big thing. Tech-enabled abuse as a result of IoTs was a significant finding from that report and led to it essentially being its own recommendation. In terms of statistics, I was quite surprised with how high this was, but 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men will experience domestic abuse at some point in their lives. And in the year ending March 23, we're looking at 2.1 million people experiencing domestic abuse. So that's a significant proportion of the population. Of those, 59%, so this was a refuge study, reported technology-enabled abuse, and that figure is only growing. Some charities have actually said that for cases they see today, it's as high as 80 or 90% of cases they're seeing have some form of technology-enabled abuse. I did want to talk a little bit about gender-based violence and the language that I'll use in the report. I will make mention of primarily women in the report due to the source material. I'm going to keep the source words as they are, and unfortunately it is a majority of, as you can see, more likely to be women who experience this abuse at the hands of male partners, but that's not to undermine that this can happen to anyone and it could happen to anyone. So I've tried to keep it as gender neutral as possible, but where the source material has included a gender, I've included it here. So when we talk about tech-enabled abuse specifically, I found a great paper that defined 5 types of tech-enabled abuse, so you can kind of categorize them and bring it into context what I mean by tech-enabled abuse. So the first one is ownership-based access. This is where a perpetrator owns the device or sets up the device or accounts, and then the victim has delegated access to them. So the person who's purchased the device or set up the account understands how the device works, has set all of the permissions and privacy settings, and can then withdraw access from that device or account from the victim, potentially for coercive control or manipulative reasons. They can also track how the account is being used and any of the data that's associated with it. So if you think about location trackers, if you think about social media accounts with messages, all of that would come under that ownership-based access. You then have account or device compromise. So this is where credentials can be guessed or coerced from the victim. It may also involve installing stalkerware on the device. A note here that stalkerware is slightly different from spyware. The terms used to be interchangeable. When I talk about stalkerware, that's going to be somebody that's known to the person whose data is being harvested. Spyware is typically an unknown third party, and it's usually for sort of metrics-based reasons or for deploying further malware. Stalkerware is specifically about obtaining information on a victim. You then have harassment, so this can involve contacting somebody on social media, either impersonating the victim or as a third party, threatening to disclose information about them, harassing friends and colleagues. And then malicious exposure is usually a form of harassment where if information has been obtained from a device that's been compromised or an account that's been compromised, threatening to share that with people that that person knows. There's also gaslighting. So you may have heard of the term outside of the realm of tech abuse, but in terms of tech abuse, it is using technology to make the victim sort of question their perception of reality. And how that can happen is saying that messages weren't sent and then deleting those messages so that person has no record that they were sent. Or sometimes it can even involve using IoTs to disrupt that person's environment in ways that they wouldn't expect, such as making the house very, very cold during the day if they've upset the person, or setting off alarms or sounds and things throughout the house. So it's important to state that a lack of confidence in technology is a big factor here, and it allows perpetrators to convince victims of a greater functionality potentially than the device has, or they can hide features from somebody. So it becomes very difficult to understand what and where those devices could be used. So it could be that they'll convince people that it can track live locations when it can't, or that you can listen in on them throughout the day in the case of like smart speakers. Devices could be smartphones, tablets, laptops, internet-connected cameras, and some of the reports have actually included internet-connected toys, which have been given as gifts to children in a relationship, which are then used to track the family. Looking specifically at the Women's Aid Federation, their abuse report for 2022, 31% of people who had approached them for support felt that their conversations were monitored online. 21% experienced the perpetrator turning up unexpectedly, so it was as if they knew their whereabouts. 20% were monitored using online accounts, so that's not just social media, that could be things such as your online banking, it could be something like what they're watching, if it's like a Netflix account, it could be a whole variety of things. 10% actually had smart listening devices, so that would either be smart speakers or could be other sort of microphone type devices in the home. And 20% experienced gaslighting from smart home devices. To bring it again into context, I wanted to include some quotes that were given as part of that report because I think it's quite important to understand what the victims have gone through at the hands of technology. So this was, watched everything I did on social media, got other people to watch and report back, tried to hack my accounts, and followed lots of my friends to see what I was doing. So this person, regardless of what they did with their own accounts, their friends and family became targets for that person in order to track and understand what they were doing. So somebody was watched and listened to on internal cameras, and if they wanted to do anything that the perpetrator couldn't find out about, they'd have to find blind spots in their own house to make sure that they couldn't be watched remotely. And for this one, so the perpetrator actually signed up their email to a funeral website, so they would receive emails telling them to plan their funeral, a particularly malicious way of trying to manipulate and upset the victim. So, as I mentioned, these cases are not highly sophisticated from a technology perspective. We're not talking about master hackers in these cases. The technology is often used exactly as it was intended to be used, but for malicious purposes. So the technology is meant to track you, but it's meant to track you maybe for protection or to find your phone or things of that nature, but instead it's being used in a malicious way. There was a great report that I read, published in 2022, and I really liked the quote that they put there, which is that conventionally, in InfoSec, we look at defending computer systems from a very specific type of threat. You know, we're all very aware of the guy in a hoodie in the basement who's after cryptocurrency, but we're not thinking of interpersonal types of harm where people who are using our systems and our devices and then are having people abuse them using those very same devices. So I wanted to do this talk as a bit of a call to action for us. As information security professionals, we should be looking at securing information for our users. We should be looking at data security, dependability, and reliability. We shouldn't be admitting this as part of our threat model. Instead, we should be designing for it. Based on the statistics I've shown, if we aren't doing this, we're letting down a significant proportion of our users at what could be the most vulnerable time in their lives. So it's important, it's something that we think about when designing any form of controls or features for our apps. So, as I said, it's not, I don't want people to be afraid of technology. That's very much not my intent when I do awareness with people. I want people to get the best out of technology. And this is about giving you the skills to go away and think about, okay, this is a big problem. How can we make this better? How can we solve it? So for people who are in a position like me where you can enact change within an organization, I've got some ideas. The first is to review your support tools. So make the information about the features in your application and what it does, what data it gathers, clear and concise. If a victim is looking to escape a perpetrator, go to a shelter, they have a very limited time window on a potentially compromised device to look up information and get the information they need about what that device can do or what that system can do. So make it clear and easy to understand. Don't have 10,000 word privacy policy where it's buried in there. Make it simple for them. Have it transparent, so make it easy to review your privacy settings. Make it easy to understand who is accessing what accounts are being delegated access to view things, how often are they being looked at. Are you considering all of your threats in your threat model? When we're thinking about, okay, how could this be abused, are we thinking about the person in the family, not just that anonymous hacker online? Larger organizations might benefit from specialized teams, so Google and Apple now have specialized teams to help with this, both for contacts for external organizations such as Refuge and Women's Aid. But if you have a large organization and you think that your application or your device could be used quite frequently in a malicious way, having a dedicated team for victims to contact and also for refugees to contact could be extremely valuable. And then, is there anything that you could introduce to help somebody who's looking to prosecute or go to court? So an example I gave when I gave the talk at Bite Size was, if you have a location find my phone feature or a location tracking feature, if somebody is going to try and argue in court that they set that up for the person's safety and it was only in there in the case of emergency, if you as an organization can help show that that person was accessing their location 4 or 5 times a day, it's clear that that is not going to be for safety reasons. It's more coercive control and manipulation. And that helps raise the bar for what they need in terms of evidence to potentially convict somebody. So we're not all in a position to enact that level of change, but even if you're not, there's a few things that I recommend you can do. The first is reaching out to organizations, your local community, to look at privacy awareness. Is there work that you could do to talk to people about what really happens with your Facebook privacy, or what really happens with your Alexa devices or your Google devices? Could you help people understand what those devices can and can't do and how to essentially take that technology back and understand how it works? There's also a lot of research that's needed in identifying and evidencing. I've given an example, but a wider example would be things like stalkerware. We have technology that can detect viruses and malware on phones, but to my knowledge, we don't have anything that can detect stalkerware very easily. And very often, refugees will just resort to putting a phone onto airplane mode or even just resetting the device because they can't guarantee that there's nothing malicious on it. having tools available that you could give to refugees, even just to give to victims to be able to scan their phone and discover those kind of apps could be incredibly important. And spread the word, talk about it. I didn't know about this until I had a conversation with my sister. She's worked for Women's Aid for a few years, and it was something that sort of took me by surprise just how bad this problem is getting. But it's not something that has to remain a problem. If we take action on it, it's something that we could actually turn around and hopefully make technology an important part of their lives. So I've got a few resources for you. The first two are support services. So these are Refuge and Women's Aid, if you do need to contact them. I've also got a couple of further readings. So Refuge actually have a tech safety team now, and the work that they're doing is incredibly important. There was an organisation called Safe Lives, which did a tech versus abuse report back in 2017. It's a really brilliant read and talks a lot about how the industry can get involved. There was also an academic report that I included here. It's too long to put on the resources, unfortunately, but please contact me if you'd like it. I'm more than happy to share it. And thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I think we've got a little time for maybe one or two questions. Does anybody have any questions?
So I do volunteering for cybersecurity where I live.
Brilliant.
So I have my Facebook, my phone, my house.
Yep.
Can you come? So I come up. So as a very voluntary basis, I do this. Is there, apart from the contact there, is there a central registry of volunteers for these sorts of cybersecurity assessments?
As in general awareness, or?
So I do security awareness training, and as well as I said,
I'd have a look at the Refuge site, so the tech abuse team for Refuge. They've got a lot of good resources on there for things that you can check with people. You could always look at reaching out to them to offer awareness. I've done that with a couple of the local organisations. Obviously, it depends on whether they've got people to support, and a lot of them are unfortunately underfunded. But yeah, they welcome any kind of support people can offer because this is such a growing issue. So yeah, have a look at those. Anyone else? Yes, so jailbroken devices is a big problem. Unfortunately, a lot of the stalkerware we see will actually be able to just be installed on phones anyway. A lot of them are off the App Store. Or this was a much more common problem before there's been a very recent crackdown on it. But you can get apps that you can install perfectly fine on an Android without jailbreaking it that can send more or less all device diagnostics to a remote server. And that person then has a lovely little dashboard. The worst case I saw was for £10 a month, you could pretty much get everything from up to 5 devices in a lovely little dashboard. You could see everywhere they'd gone, Wi-Fi networks, Bluetooth devices, everything. So unfortunately, yeah, stalkerware is a massive problem. But as they crack down on it, I'd imagine there will be a rise in jailbroken devices as well. Yeah. Yeah, third parties. And yeah. Yep, it's just built-in features. It's very often built-in features. It's not necessarily, we're not talking about hacking, we're talking... Yes, absolutely. Fab. Anything else? If not, you can grab me afterwards. I'm more than happy to have a chat about it. Fab. Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks.